Welcome to Firefighting Today, the weekly roundtable where we talk about all sorts of things fire service related. We meet here every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We appreciate anybody who might be watching us over on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube and you leave a YouTube comment, we're able to interact with you. We can bring you right into the panel and involve you in the discussion. So we'd encourage you to do that, and we'll show that a couple of more times. So first things first, we will introduce the panel and then we'll get started. So, all right, my name is Pete Lamb. I'm the author of PeteLamb.com, and I'm also the host of the Firefighter Training Podcast. If you have not subscribed to that, you can get that in iTunes, Stitcher, any place you want to get podcasts, you can do that, or you can just go to firefightertrainingpodcast.com and listen to the back episodes. First in line, Warren, introduce yourself to the folks. First time roundtabling with us. Quick introduction of your background, and we'll take it from there. Go ahead.
Good evening, folks. My name is Warren Whitley. I'm a retired assistant chief from Prince William County, Virginia. Recently moved to the east coast of North Carolina, where even though there will be a freeze warning tonight, it's back into the mid-70s by midweek, which is why I moved here. Had a strong interest in fire behavior and instruction, and that has been my background for the past few years.
Excellent. Thanks, Warren. John, say hello.
Hello, everyone. John Fisher here. I'm a battalion chief with San Diego Fire Rescue, where it's still in the mid-70s, although we did get a half-inch of rain the other day, so we're on track to set some records here. Probably more pertinent to tonight's discussion, I'm a planning section chief on a federal incident management team and done some work in the USAR world over the years.
Excellent, excellent, thanks. Joe Starnes, say hello, tell the folks about yourself.
Good afternoon, Chief. My job is to carry the bags for Chief Peter Lamb, and I am glad to be here, Chief. Thank you. I am a member of Oak Grove Volunteer Fire Department. They're nice enough to have me. I'm one of the co-managers of Project Kill the Flashover, and I mess around with a thing called joestarnes.com. So, by the way, Chief Hood is one of the premier characters in Project Kill the Flashover, so I'm glad he's on tonight.
Excellent. And Adam, say hello.
Hello guys, Adam Gay, coming from Kellogg, Iowa, on the Kellogg Volunteer Fire Department. I'm a captain.
All right, excellent. So tonight the conversation is, what about outside interagency activity, whether it be at your routine structure fire? How do you manage it? How do you handle it? Any good case histories or bad case histories where that may have happened? And is any of that automatic? Does anything happen automatic? Now, we've got a variety of size agencies here, a couple of very large agencies. I'm probably from middle of the road, and Adam's probably on the smaller side. So, Adam, who do you typically interact with at a standard structural fire? Not the big deal, but the standard structural fire. Who do you get involved with?
On a rather standard structure fire, we're going to have mainly the power company is our main one that's going to come to our scene and cut the power to the structure. Whenever we do have a structure fire here, they're really good on getting here as soon as possible. A lot of times our dispatch will automatically get a hold of the power company for us, so we don't even have to ask for them. Sometimes we do have to. So that's our main one on the Fireground that we really interact with.
And who's your law enforcement there, Adam? Is it a local law enforcement or is it a county sheriff system?
It's the county sheriffs, and we do interact with them on fire scenes too, and they're pretty good about coming out too if we need them. Okay,
all right, good enough. John, in the city, does any of that happen automatically? Let's talk about standard structure fires first. Anything happening automatically, and how does that work? How do you interact with them? You're muted, John. And I actually could read lips.
There we go. That's probably too bad. Automatically depends a little bit on the type of call. Obviously, on utility-related calls, our dispatchers will update San Diego Gas and Electric pretty quickly. We do have a link. There's some sort of link in our CAD system between us and San Diego Gas and Electric that can aid with that a little bit. On things like structure fires, it depends more on the incident commander asking for what it is that they need.
All right, so talk about a little bit, and I'll go back to Adam after. So, what about when a fire is knocked down and squared away? What about inspectional services? Do you need electrical inspectors, local inspectors? Is it one and the same? How does that work in your world, John?
For us, it's all, for the most part, through the city. One of the city inspectors will come out, usually the next day. SDG&E policy requires that if they pull the meter, if they cut the service, it requires an electrical inspection to turn back on. So that's where the city gets involved. Something we actually try and be fairly careful about, not killing the power if it's not something that's going to really require an inspection, so we can get people their power back on more quickly. We've done that before, where we tried not to kill everything, where we knew there's not going to be a need for an inspection. So we weren't holding them up because of that. But yeah, that's pretty much how the inspection world works.
Okay, good enough. Warren, you came from a pretty large system. Does any of that happen automatically, and who do you interface with generally?
Well, we had the fun part of having multiple electrical and gas companies, depending on which part of the county, but the dispatchers could tell by the address and CAD who to call. So they would usually contact them if it seemed to be a working fire even before the units were, or as the units were dispatched. They'd go ahead and notify them to get them there. Partly because one of our policies is they don't pull meters anymore. So the power company would do that if we needed. It was pretty good. A lot of times the gas company, if they were called even for normal gas leaks, would get there before we could in some cases.
Yeah. So I was in two different worlds, two departments, two experiences. One of them was a large electrical company utility service, but my most recent assignment in North Attleboro, Mass., the municipality had its own electric company. So it's just phenomenal. I mean, we would get response times that were ridiculous. People would wonder about it. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Warren, because there might be still people out there that are watching us or paying attention. The days of fire departments pulling meters, I think, are gone. That was common many years ago, and certainly of a certain age, but you don't have to do that any longer. I think John's comment about getting people back in the house was also important. What's your relationship? How long would it take you to get Red Cross assistance out there if you had civilians displaced? Adam, is that something you use out there?
Yeah, we have used Red Cross in the past on if the structure's pretty well heavily damaged. They will contact Red Cross, and Red Cross will send people out to get them what they need and some shelter. So
yeah. How long is it taking for that to happen?
I'm not sure on how long. I mean, they seem to be pretty Johnny on the spot. As much as I know, as far as I've seen.
Okay. John, how long does it take you to get Red Cross? You probably have good resources, but I'm wondering what the time delay is.
It's usually, it seems like we usually get a 90-minute ETA from Red Cross because, of course, their volunteers are coming from home. They've got to go pick up their response vehicle and head out. And, it's not like a volunteer fire department. We're covering a pretty large area, 300 and something square miles. So their folks have a bit of a drive to come meet us.
Yeah, absolutely. Warren, what was the ETA for Red Cross for displaced citizens or anything of the sort?
It was usually pretty quick, 20 to 30 minutes. And they also would if they were going to call the Red Cross, they generally would have one of the department chaplains go as well, just to help to facilitate that conversation with the Red Cross between the family.
Okay. Yeah, I would say we have a pretty slow response. They've consolidated everything up here in the Northeast. The Northeast, when I say it's like a big deal, it's not, John. Your area is, twice what we're talking about. But they've really eliminated many of the response teams, and it's certainly 90 minutes or better. Maybe up to 2 hours, and over 2 hours we've had situations waiting. And I think that's just the way it's structured up here. There are not many volunteers left, certainly, that are doing that. We're a little volunteer poor up here, and they get hit pretty heavy with some of the major cities. I would say between Boston, Providence, New Haven, Hartford, those are the major cities. They're displacing multiple families at a time, so that really becomes a big deal. Joe, how does it work in your area in terms of outside response? We didn't talk about utility response, gas and electric, and maybe the Red Cross. How does it work in your area?
They're pretty responsive. I mean, the gas company here is a city. The city of Shelby owns the gas company as the services my particular area. Then we've got power companies are pretty responsive to that. The Red Cross is a half hour maximum. They'll even feed firefighters on large incidents. So they're pretty cooperative. The sheriff's office is really cooperative, big time cooperative. Highway Patrol, there's a good relationship with the state highway patrol here. So from a public safety aspect, real strong cooperation.
So let's, you mentioned one thing, and we're going to talk about the law enforcement aspect, and even though the relationship's positive, are you seeing things where there are challenges? Every day on the internet we read about challenges, but let's back up to something else you said there, Joe. Warren, what was your situation for rehab for firefighters? Now, of course, there's medical rehab with ambulances, but was there any provision to get food on scene or anything for long-term incidents, and who did that and how did that take place?
If it was during the weekdays, Monday through Friday, our warehouse manager would take care of that. They ran a canteen out of the warehouse. Weekends, nights, volunteers, one on each end of the county could pretty much cover a canteen, either from Dale City or Gainesville out that way. So it was usually pretty good. And if it was really big, they'd recall the warehouse manager if we couldn't get any of the volunteers out.
Okay, good. John, how does that work in your world for large-scale incidents if folks need rehab, food, et cetera, et cetera?
Pretty much the same way. Our logistics section has coolers and ice and all that kind of stuff, and of course the credit card. There's several of them in there, and there is a duty logistics person. The San Diego Firehouse Museum, Pioneer Hook and Ladder, also has a canteen, which is owned by the city but staffed by volunteers from the museum. A little bit longer response time for them, same issues with the Red Cross, but they do a great job coming out to feed folks, that kind of thing. More snacks from the canteen. If we need full-on meals and that kind of stuff, it's arranged by our logistics folks.
Right. And I would imagine that you have some capabilities, certainly, through the wildfire stuff and that sort of thing. I mean, you can actually bring in full-on kitchens, I assume, if you had to, if it was the scope of the incident, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh yeah. We'll, CAL FIRE has MKUs, is what they're called, mobile kitchen units that can come out and feed, I think they'll do right around 1,500 people a day. 2 meals a day, and then sack lunches.
Right.
And we can order contract kitchens through Forest Service contracts.
All right. Excellent. Adam, what happens in your world? You probably don't have a warehouse manager and a logistics person, so I'm just guessing you don't have that capability. No. So what are you doing if you got the long-term incident? Who handles your, sort of the care and feeding and that sort of thing with firefighters?
I have seen Salvation Army actually come out and help out with that. We had one long incident where we actually had some of our local businesses bring out bottled water and food to feed the firefighters.
Okay. All right. And ours is kind of interesting. Locally, it is the fire buffs, right? The sparks, the people that, photographers and so on, and chase fires. We have an unbelievable group of people, and they're on scene. They basically monitor and can be dispatched at a moment's notice, and they're on scene in 20 or 30 minutes. Their vehicle has toilet capabilities as well as kitchen capabilities, so it really helps out. I mean, they show up at routine structure fires and just make sure, if it's cold, they'll give you coffee. If it's warm, they'll give you Gatorade and water and so forth, and get you squared away. It's not an excuse for rehab, but it is to supplement medical rehab if that's ongoing as you go. Well, so we talked about, and I also had a positive relationship with law enforcement. Have we had any instances, in talking with Warren and Joe here, have the police got the message that they shouldn't be opening doors and doing things? Have you had any interactions where police have been well-meaning, certainly, and I don't want, names and numbers here, but have you had any instances where police maybe have done some things that have had a negative impact? Warren, you kind of chuckled at that one. You got a story that goes with that?
Yeah, we've had in my career several incidents of the cops helping us out with unnecessary ventilation. Making the fire worse. By the time we got there, we knew exactly where it was, which was everywhere. But they've learned, and we've even got now our dispatchers are telling the citizens when they call to close the door.
Yeah, excellent.
And there have been conversations with the police recruits and their shift commanders about spreading the same word to their guys.
So let me ask you, do you have the opportunity to get into the police recruit school? Do you get an opportunity to send a fire guy over there for a day or so, or how does that work?
I'm not sure if they're doing that now or not. There have been some discussions about it. And generally, our fire marshal guys, when they do their police training, go through the police recruit school now, so that they get, just the peer-to-peer interaction, spreading that word has worked pretty well over the past several years.
Right. John, any situations where maybe doors got opened, apartment houses, things like that? Again, it's well intentioned, and I don't want anybody watching to think I'm trashing the police here, but it's as Warren said, it's the civilian population as well. I mean, you have the neighbor next door running and leaving doors open as well. So, John, any instances like that?
Yeah, we have had a few. Nothing with a real negative outcome that I'm aware of, anyway. It is a challenge, especially with a city as large as this, getting the message out to all the officers. SDPD has had a huge challenge over the last couple of years with recruiting and retention. So it seems like just as we get folks kind of understanding what's going on, they move on somewhere else. So that part has been a challenge. I know there's been a number of meetings between our senior staff and senior staff over at the police department to try and resolve some of those issues, and it does seem like it's getting a lot better.
Yeah, I think there is a common understanding. Joe, in the rural area, police are probably there first, right? I'm going to talk to you and Adam about that. In many cases, I'm guessing law enforcement might beat you to the scene. Have you had any situations where openings might have been made that you would have rather not had been made?
Well, I moved here in 2008, and I was speaking with the sheriff a couple times, spoke to him recently, and we're going on their continuing ed plan for their officer, a program called the First 9 Minutes. And that's going to be, these are little 30-minute blips with their officers on briefings, and the concept is to cover that. And what the idea is to favorably influence that first 9 minutes. And so they're pretty proactive about it. We haven't had much issues in the last couple of years, so they're pretty aware. But I got some more stories from a day by, but nothing of current. They're pretty aware, and they're pretty cooperative. they're great about getting us in and making sure that we get in. They're great about keeping other people out. So been very pleased with what I've experienced since I've been in this county.
Excellent, excellent. So, Adam, what happens? Any situations where law enforcement is first or giving you a problem?
No. With being through the county, it depends on how close they are to us. Their closest car could be across the county, so we'll probably majority of the time we're there first before they are. But if they do beat us, they're pretty good about not opening the door. They're pretty much good about securing the scene to make sure no one's going up, doing stuff they're not supposed to. But yeah, we've never had any problems with our law enforcement at all.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so let's expand this incident to a larger scale. Who else is coming? I mean, we've talked about the simple structure fire incident. That's where I wanted to spend some time to see who's coming. We've talked about, we didn't really get into it, but I think it was either John or Warren said, the chaplain corps, great idea. If you've got chaplains, they can be a great resource for the customer, if you will, for the citizen that's been affected. Sometimes that can be a great benefit, certainly. So let's talk about the large-scale incidents. John, let me switch right over to you. Who's coming in those large-scale incidents? The bigger commercials, the hazmat. What other outside agencies should people be looking for?
Well, the primary one, since you mentioned hazmat, our agency has the contract for the initial hazmat team response for the entire county, but that contract works in combination with the county's Department of Environmental Health. Essentially, we're the response arm, they're the enforcement arm. So on a hazmat call or something like that, they'd be the one of the top folks that are coming out. They also handle health department issues after hours. If we have a fire in a restaurant, they're the ones that come out to deal with the permitting process and that kind of thing there. Beyond that, as fires get bigger and bigger, just like everybody else, we have adjoining agencies that we work with. As fires get into the large-scale wildland fires, quakes, that kind of thing we're dealing with. Now we're working in conjunction with CAL FIRE, with Forest Service, with the county sheriff as well as the local SDPD. Start dealing with Caltrans, et cetera, state parks, just a multitude of agencies.
All right, so I'm going to go back to you, John, because I think you probably, between you and Warren, got the most experience as it relates to large-scale ICS stuff. So, Warren, anything you want to add? So we covered Department of Health, environmental, we covered a bunch of stuff. Who else in these big-scale incidents, Warren, have you seen show up or had to interact with?
Well, depending on where it is, we'll get Virginia Department of Transportation on the interstates. The railroads, depending on where the incident is, Virginia Department of Forestry. There's 2 large pipelines that run through the county. We've had to interact with representatives from those folks before. Military bases, Quantico's in the county. There just depends. There's the EPA,
right.
Virginia environmental folks, health department.
What's the interaction like? Is it extremely difficult when you get into that federal facility, or does it get better? Is there a better understanding, or is it more complex? What's your experience, Warren?
Well, Quantico now has mutual response with us. That took many years to get to that level, but even before then, the relationship was good. Getting on base when we went in, the town of Quantico is actually surrounded by the base. So the county had to respond through the base to get to the town. So it's never really been an issue getting on that base. And the communications are good because they have impact areas and places where if there's a brush fire you don't want to go. But the other thing the county has had it probably started 10 years before I retired, was the emergency manager would have a monthly meeting with all the county department heads and the county exec. So they would go through all the contingency plans, do drills, get all those agencies within the county working together ahead of an incident. So, if the fire department needed somebody from Public Works with a backhoe or a heavy piece of equipment to come do something for us, they knew exactly who to call and how long it would take to get there, what resources there were, and all those folks have been exposed to ICS. It's great help.
Right, right. And I would say, if anybody's watching this, I mean, what Warren just hit on right there was the gold for this particular incident, and that is you've got to pre-plan. If you're dealing with outside agencies, you have got to have pre-incident meetings. You don't want to be exchanging business cards at the scene of the incident. You clearly have to have these meetings ahead of time and make them productive meetings. It's not everybody sit around, eat a bagel. They're productive meetings. What have you got? What can you bring to the table? So on and so forth. And I have found that anytime you're doing that, you certainly have a better outcome on the Fireground without question once the parties know one another. Let's switch over to John. John's been troubled getting in here. John, we're talking about outside agencies coming to your incident. You got any experience with that or anything you'd like to add? John, are you there? There you are. You're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
All right, very good. Sorry about this tonight, having some computer issues.
That's
but
okay.
we get a lot of outside agencies coming into our department. We're a small city. Anytime we go beyond a second alarm, we automatically get outside agencies, and it's not just career. We're getting volunteer agencies coming in as well as career agencies. So the interaction with that has been set forth many, many years ago through mutual aid agreements.
Well, let me ask you, John. I mean, that's the pregnant question that plagues a lot of the fire service in America. Are there any challenges? And I'm don't name names or anything, but is there a volunteer career personnel challenge? Do you see it? You're muted, John. If you're trying to answer me, there you go.
There we go. You know what? I haven't seen it firsthand. I know there is that. There's an issue, I guess an underlying issue at times between career and volunteer. You know what? I started out as a career firefighter. I'm still a career. Started out as a volunteer firefighter, and I went to career. I'm still a volunteer. So I basically look at it this way: it's something that we want to do. The volunteers, they want to assist. They put their time into it. They take the training, and sometimes they have better equipment sometimes than we do on the career side. Dare I say that?
Yeah, no, I mean, they're not paying salaries and stuff, so sometimes the equipment is better. I'm gonna continue that conversation over with Warren in just a second, but we got a note here from Tim. Thanks for being on, Tim. I always appreciate you being in the audience. They still have an auxiliary where Tim is, County EMS and Rehab and Red Cross. Gas company also joins the command post, and they do seem to have an interagency working together. So yeah, absolutely, that's great stuff, Tim. Thank you for jumping in there. I appreciate it. Warren, you were a true very large combination system. Can you remind the folks watching how large a system you were? And it was a combination system, if I recall, correct?
Yeah, it still is.
Okay.
Let's see. Well, they just lost a volunteer company, so there's 10 or 11 volunteer companies, 22 stations, covering 354 square miles. Most of the west end of the county now, which was historically the more rural section, not so much anymore, pretty much has 24-hour career coverage, but still combination houses. East end was very heavily urbanized, suburban, the 95 corridor. Still has a pretty good volunteer presence, and they still own the majority of the stations and equipment. At the rank and file level, I think the cooperation is pretty good. When I left, there was still, within the policy-making body for the county, for the fire service, the push and pull of trying to create policy that worked for both sides of the organization. But overall, it's worked pretty well. It's matured, I'd say, since I had first joined the department.
Okay. Okay, good. Adam, do you see any of that friction out there? You're surrounded by, you got a suburban department next to you, right? Do you see any of those challenges?
No, we really haven't seen any challenges with the career department that's neighboring us, and they're the only career department that's pretty much surrounding us. All the other departments are volunteer, so I haven't really seen any friction between us and the career.
All right. John, let's talk a little bit about managing these outside incidents, right? So if I look at, incident command training, I see the position of a liaison officer, and I also hear conversation about unified command. Can you talk a little bit about it on a simpler scale for some of the folks that might be listening? Not the huge wildfire situation, but how do you can establish a simple unified command situation. At what point do you think you need to start getting the liaison officer and so forth? Can you kind of dumb that down for all of us here that are not using it every day?
Well, you said wildfire, so I guess you're talking about this, John. Two of us in here tonight. So,
right.
When you start getting a bunch of multiple agencies, I got to tell you, going back in my history, really the first big incident I had, I'd been at BC for all of, 6 weeks, and we had an explosion in a hotel downtown under construction. Explosion in a hotel, that immediately starts bringing all those folks with the blue jackets with 3 letters on the back and that kind of thing. All kinds of folks running around trying to figure out what's going on with this thing. My boss at the time, I think one of the best things he did was grab one of the second alarm chiefs and make him a liaison officer. He was able to corral all of those folks and start us heading in the right direction. Use it. Go ahead.
Well, so the question is, I corral a bunch of outside agencies, and somebody's got to make a decision who really gets a seat at the table, who really gets moved up to unified command. Talk about that discussion a little bit.
Sure. Ironically, this week I'm teaching ICS 400, so this is a pretty good warm-up. And one of the great things about that here in the county is the folks we're teaching ICS to, really not that many fire folks in the class anymore. A lot of them have already had it, so now I've got a lot of folks from the water department, county water authority, a lot of San Diego Sheriff's lieutenants, even one captain in this upcoming class. So they're really on board working with us. Seat at the table, a lot of times it comes down to really 2 things. Either there's something black and white that gives somebody jurisdictional authority, or they've got a checkbook or a credit card and they're willing to throw it on the table. That's really kind of how it comes down.
Yep, good stuff. I'm going to go back to that. I'm going to reach over to Joe for a minute for his interaction from the other side. But comment here from Ethan, who's been challenged trying to get in and out here. Thanks for hanging with us, Ethan. Up here in the north, certainly salt trucks in the winter, DPW resources. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's critical. And the Coast Guard in the summer for water rescues and drownings. So, yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ethan, for that. I would just tell you my own personal experience. I was the fire chief over in Tiverton, Rhode Island for a while. Rhode Island isn't called the Ocean State for nothing. There's more water than land, I think, in some cases. But I would tell you my interaction with the Coast Guard was probably the finest federal agency I've ever worked with, bar none. Just a phenomenal working relationship. It was really great to have. Sometimes you groan when somebody shows up with multiple letters on their jacket, but I was always happy to see USCG for sure. Great rapport with them. Joe, talk a little bit from the outside, if you will. You bring an interesting perspective to this as a phone company person and talking about disaster recovery. You were on the other side. So coming into these incidents, what was your relationship with emergency services? How did that work from your perspective, from the other side out?
Well, I worked for AT&T Network Disaster Recovery, and our job was to put telephone service back in recovery mode. They had their own special operations teams. Read that as hazmat team. Their hazmat team did not mitigate uh, uh, agents or chemicals. They were about doing telephone work and protective gear, protective equipment, and then of course we had a large amount of assets and trailers that would possibly roll to that. So for many years we would go to conferences, and also when we'd hold our drills 4 times a year, we would always work inside the emergency management system where we were. So we trained in incident management, and then our command system for the telephone response was an ICS system. So the words were the same, and the language was the same. The functions were the same. So when they looked at the telephone company, in this case, when they looked at us, we were ICS. So we called everything by functional names, and we had interoperability radio systems. A lot of times we were well equipped as some of the places we responded to, and we were able to often provide them a lot of support capabilities. For instance, John, in the wildfires, I think you see a lot of the satellite trucks, and in California we do that quite often, or we did that quite often. I'm no longer there, being a retired old geezer, but the bottom line is we tried to, the concept, Chief, was just to look local. We tried to look local. We would try to do a liaison, come into it. We used Web EOC. That's a pretty common set of software, and we could link into their Web EOC or their emergency management system out of their EOCs, or they could link into ours. We tried to be as local as we possibly could be to them, and we always had an incident action plan that we worked under their IAP and their health and safety plan. A lot of times we were a little more, sometimes more disciplined in that area than some of the places we arrived at.
Yeah, okay. Good stuff, good stuff. Let's just kind of run the panel. Warren, was your department, you were a piece of emergency management, but were you responsible for emergency management, or was that a county function?
It was a county function under the county executive. The fire chief was designated the EOC chief, but he usually passed that to the emergency manager. And the different chiefs would be, for instance, I was the planning section chief, and the ops chief would become the ops boss, and so on. So it worked out pretty well.
Okay, good. John, what is the role of fire versus, is it county-based? Well, does the city have its own emergency management, or is it county, or how does that work, and where does fire fit in?
Yeah, the city does have its own emergency management section. They do currently report to the fire chief. There's a little bit of movement afoot to maybe change that, but we'll see how that shakes out politically. So they report to the fire chief, and then they basically manage the OC and all that kind of bit. The county, of course, has its own emergency management section. And they handle the county EOC, and then of course the two work hand in hand to take care of any large incidents, along with both the EOC and DOC from the different agencies out there that we're working with.
Okay, good. John, what's the deal with emergency management, and how much does fire get involved, and are you familiar with that software that Joe was talking about, that Web EOC? Is that something that's on your radar? John Haywick. Sorry. You're muted, John.
No problem. I'm back on yet?
You are.
All right. Basically, our city has an OEM. It's been mostly under the police side of it. Obviously, fire department has their hands in it when needed. We've actually been brought to the table regarding the Ebola issue when it was a couple weeks ago. We were sitting in on meetings with as well as the EMS and the OEM, just bringing information back when the CDC first started giving out information regarding donning and doffing procedures and everything else. I am not familiar with the software that you guys were speaking of. I'd like to get some more information on that as well.
All right. Typically, that's a software used by local and county agencies, and it basically is a real-time live update. It's always password secured, so you got to be an authorized person, an authorized user to be able to do that. The system does tend to overload. Certainly up here, we've had some negative experiences in Massachusetts with it, where it tends to overload. But basically, you're almost reading a chat room, if I can take it down to that level. In each city and town would be indicating to the state. The state would be reading a master list of, trees down, power outages, schools out, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, it's live status updates that continuously feeds through, and it's usually at a state or a county level, although sometimes it can be at a local level. Adam, how do you interact with emergency management resources? Is it county, state, and does fire have a seat?
Our EMA is in the county. The only time I've ever seen them come out was, I think it was last year when we had a flood here in our little town. It was the only time I've ever seen EMA come out to anything in our area. He reported to chief and then kind of surveyed some of the damage and stuff that was going on.
Okay, all right, good enough. So what aren't we touching? What about outside contractors? Now we brought in Joe from an AT&T standpoint, but what about the local private contractors? Did you ever have relationships where there were always prearranged agreements? How did that work? And did you ever use them on significant incidents? Warren, local DPW or outside contractors, any case history you got where you use those? You're muted, Warren. All right, I'll come back to you then. All right, let's do that. We'll have our IT department contact you and see how that works. John, private contractors like Fred's construction company down the street's got 3 dump trucks and 4 backhoes. Any interaction with folks like that?
Yeah, we do maintain a number of contracts with folks we can bring in if we need to. The one where it gets used the most is again in the hazmat world, where we've got a contract with a local cleanup provider who'll come out. I don't know how everybody else is doing with it out there, but we seem to have a lot of folks that are unable to take their 5-gallon bucket of used motor oil to the parts store for recycling and leave it in the alley instead. So we've got contracted folks that'll come out and pick that up, all the paint and that kind of thing that folks leave out there. That's the most common one. And then as we stretch into the bigger picture, we've got contracts out there. We can bring in folks even for additional vehicles to use if necessary. We can bring in, even throughout California, there's contract private fire protection folks that we can bring in on larger fires if we need to. Don't see that happen too often down here. It happens quite a bit in Northern California. A lot of your wildfires largely run on contractors, water tenders, dozers, that kind of thing, to supplement all the government stuff when it's needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's switch over to Joe. Joe, what are you screen sharing? I got you locked up here. Is that your team operating? Joe, I've got the screen up as a screen share, but you're muted. There you go.
All right, here we go. That's a special operations team. That's them in a level A suits. They're actually doing telephone maintenance repair. They train in that level, full-blown operations, supported with another contractor outside. They work under the command system of the local emergency management or fire agency, and that's one of their training slides there where they were working.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, I would tell you that, my experience here in the Northeast is that I have actually had some very good success with contractors where they were able to provide resources quicker than I might have gotten elsewhere. Nice to have those arrangements already prearranged, but I can think of one incident. It's too bad Charlie isn't with us tonight. We had a tanker of jet fuel, unignited but severely ruptured on the highway, and one of our best resources was a local contractor that was able to provide 18-wheelers full of sand, machines to move it, diking, damming, all of that sort of stuff, and just did a phenomenal job even before state resources got on scene. Now, that one was not a prearrangement. I would just caution people that are listening. We made it very clear. We had a state police high-ranking officer, myself, on there, and said to the guy, the guy offered his assistance, and we just made it abundantly clear to him that we had no idea how he was getting paid. We were not buying his service, but if he was willing, we would allow him to bill after the fact. Usually, all of that must be done ahead of time, but in this one particular case, we had a very good, successful incident by just managing somebody right there on the scene. Joe, hold that slide. I'm going to go over to John Haywick. John, what's your experience with local outside contractors? Any experience with that, positive or negative?
The only thing I've seen is positive with the outside contractors. We first saw that with the Hurricane Irene and then Hurricane Sandy afterwards. Guys working with the electric company, the crews coming from the Midwest, from Ohio, and everything else, coming out doing great jobs, clearing the streets, clearing the lines, and getting the lines back up onto the poles. So a lot of good positive things. This is more towards the. I saw this on the west side of the northwest side of New Jersey, not towards the city, but up by where I live. We've had a lot of downed trees and everything else, and these contractors were great. They came in, they worked shifts, and they worked hand in hand with the local crews.
John, it might be worth a separate hangout, but just briefly, how much devastation? Give me the geography. How bad was Passaic hit during Hurricane Sandy? What was what was it? A rain issue, a wind issue? What was your major issues?
Passaic's bordered on a tidal river. Actually, the Passaic River runs all the way down into Newark. So what we got was that tidal surge. So we had some minor flooding, a lot of power outage issues, and with that came the crowding due to the fact of the gas rationing and the shortages and no power. Right. So that was our major issue in the city of Passaic.
Right.
For Sandy.
Okay, good. Joe, why don't you explain what you're sharing now? That looks like one of your deployments, maybe.
That was the World Trade Center.
Talk a little bit about that for the folks that might not understand. So, what did the phone company have to do with after the World Trade Center bombing? What was the issue there?
Well, you had the communications in about 17-block area destroyed, and then you had, of course, AT&T had 2 switches, one in each tower. That particular site there is in New Jersey, right across the Hudson, looking into the atrium of the World Trade Center area, and that was about a 24-25 tractor-trailer response to put that back. So they ran fiber cable up the street, pulled it from the tunnel, went into Manhattan with it, and then they put this complex there, and that's a compound that put those services back. And in 52 hours they had dial tone on the switch going through there, and then that Monday morning they had fiber rings up with radio shots, and they had the stock market back up. So that was working with the state and federal agencies, and also they provided telephone service to one police plaza with a satellite unit, took 100 phones, 96 phones into there, and then they provided satellite coverage and telephone services for the rehab at the harbor. So there was a lot going on there. I was there about 45 days, and so that's just that's the type of equipment you would roll in when you would have that many tractor trailers and that much logistics. They are a self-contained organization, so when they set up, they have their own trailers that are shops and welders and everything, so they don't want for much, but they do need access, and do need security, and often they do need fuel.
Yeah, Joe, a bunch of trailers there. What does that compound represent in number of resources of people? How many people did you actually deploy in that unit there?
It clipped on me. Say again.
How many? Well, I'm looking at the resources, the tractor trailers, and so on and so forth. What does that represent for your organization in terms of people, personnel? How many personnel deployed on that incident?
In that incident, anywhere from 60 to 100 typically at any given time. There's 2 command trailers there. They're 53 foot. They'll see one on the left. It's got pop-out sides. They're fully self-contained. They're full PBXs, full ham radios, full. They've got satellite services. They're chased with a communications van that brings them in everything they need, and then they set up the whole site. They set up the emergency communications, and then they put the logistics to that site, and they power. They're self-contained. They're power-wise. Each one of those technology trailers has its own generator. The site has its own 500 kW generator, runs the site. They bring their own food, water, kitchen, everything. So
excellent.
All
Great.
self-contained.
Yeah, no, that's great stuff. That's the kind of stuff we were looking to talk about exactly, Joe. So thank you for that. All right, so we've got a few minutes left as we begin to wrap up. Warren, let's just kind of give some people some summary statements here as we run the panel. We'll run the panel down. Some summary statements. What do you need to know if you're a small department viewing this situation? What do you need to know about working with outside agencies? Warren, any tips you can give somebody? Just some simple one-liners here about working with outside agencies.
Yeah, establish relationships before the incident.
Yeah, I think that's a big one.
Yeah, I mean that's a no-brainer. But you got to say it.
Yeah.
I guess another one is you make the people that are going to be involved, and you have some idea what ICS is about, so they kind of have an understanding if they're coming in cold what the expectations are, and where the commander is. Simple things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great word you used, Warren, too, is the expectations, right? When you're dealing with an outside, what is it I expect you to do? What is it you can expect of me? That's stuff that needs to be defined early on. John, a couple of summary statements for folks listening. How do you deal with outside agencies?
Sure. The number one thing I try and get across to folks is that in the famous words of the IC that I've worked for a lot of years now, unified command is more than parking your command trailer in the same parking lot. You very simply, I mean, ICS is objective based. You need to get together with everybody that's got a stake in that interest, or a stake or an interest in that incident, and make sure that everybody's objectives are being met. That's what's going to get everything taken care of in the first place, one, and two, it's going to prevent hard feelings down the road. Even with real incidents, some of the famous newsworthy incidents have come out with firefighters being arrested by law enforcement, that kind of thing. It's all that is a case of differing objectives, and those objectives not being met by both agencies.
Right, exactly. Joe, a couple of tips for people working with outside agencies. You've actually been on both sides of that, so what can you tell folks that are watching? You're muted, Joe.
I can't add too much more than the panel has. The panel's excellent, a lot of experience. The concept is simply work inside the system. Get inside this system, work inside this system. Be a part of the prioritization of what work has to be done, and assist in that work. One of the probably most important thing is being able to scratch each other's back. The vendor will need things to do their job, and you will need some of the stuff that they have to do your job. Communications is, we used to swap that. We swapped that off a lot. You needed communications. We needed to have access. We need to be able to get inside the zone. You need to be familiar with us enough that we've talked to you beforehand, like Warren says, and that when you get there, you're not a stranger, and they got confidence. The other thing I would suggest is we had a PIO package. If we didn't know the incident commander, our liaison officer would go to that command post and with their liaison officer and try to create a confidence level that we wouldn't cause them trouble and that we could get our job done and they could do their job. And what could we swap off? So, like I said, we needed security, access, and fuel, and where I came from. That was the biggest thing. And then we needed to be able to hook into their planning model so they could tell what we were doing and we could tell when we could do it. So that's probably my best tip.
All right, thank you. John, summaries for working with outside agencies or interagency cooperation, what have you got?
One of the biggest things, and it's everybody's touched on this. You put me towards the end after these the heavy hitters hit all the answers. But one of the best things is coming to that doorway looking for that common objective. I'm not the first one to say this, but check your egos at the door. Everybody's there, and everybody's got a purpose, and everybody's got a need. So let's basically work together to get to that common goal. My goal might be different than police's goal or EMS's goal or communication side, but we're all there to get the big picture taken care of.
Excellent, excellent. Adam, we stole every bit of your thunder. I don't know. What do you got? You got anything? What are you going to do a little differently after listening to this episode?
Just get to know who your outside agencies are, and what they're available for, and just be sure you know what you need from these folks when we give them a call. Whether it's food or coffee or whatever it is. Be sure you know what you need from them.
Yeah, and also let them know what they can expect from you. So it's actually the reverse of that. Greg, we are actually at the very tail end. I wanted to say hello to Greg coming in. Any tips for operating with agencies outside of your own, not necessarily mutual aid fire? Do you have any tips for folks operating outside of interagency cooperation?
Occasional large-scale simulations in advance. So we've done that with at the airport with an airplane wreck. So we had ambulance, emergency social services, the city, airport operation, search and rescue. Those things were great. We learned all our weak spots. So.
All right. So certainly a benefit to either tabletop testing or full-scale actual exercise testing ahead of time. That will certainly build bridges with interagencies and outside agency cooperations. So good. I think I thank everybody on the panel. I appreciate everybody participating tonight. We will say good night. We will be here next week. At 8 p.m. We have a topic already online. We're going to be talking about the promotional process, how people get selected, how people get promoted, so on and so forth, those methods and that kind of stuff. So we are talking about the promotional process next week, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here, and we'll send you out an invite and all that sort of stuff. So good night all, and I'll ask the panel members just to hang around.